All right, everybody, welcome to episode 12 of Heath Barn Hoopcast. I'm your host, John Heath. This episode, great episode. It is with former Illini and current athletic director at Eastern Illinois University, Tom Michael. And he's about what you would think he would be. He was an amazing guest. We start from the beginning with him. He talks about growing up in a really small town. We started all the way from junior high and work our way all the way through. Talks about having his dad as a coach when he was young. Talks about the differences between small town guys and big city guys, playing at big colleges, things like that. We talk about all that kind of stuff. But, we go into high school and playing for Carlisle High School. And then we get into all the good stuff, recruiting stories, playing in college. He was redshirting the year that the Flying Illini were there. So he talks about that, playing against all those guys. Talks about Coach Henson. But we get into all kinds of stuff because, again, as an athletic director, we talk a lot about, we get through all the Illinois stuff and everything like that, his role on the team, stories, great stories. Like I said, he's an amazing guest. But then we get into some athletic director things, which is very, very interesting. If you want to hear some candid thoughts about the transfer portal and NIL and all those kind of things from a Division I athletic director, this is a great episode for you to listen to because, we get into that and he gives very, very, I would say candid thoughts, on all those things. But it was extremely interesting for me to listen to him and get his the thoughts of somebody that's actually in all this, like really, really in these situations and dealing with it at kind of a mid-major school and things like that. And man, it was just a great conversation. I feel like the longer we talked, the more he kind of not let loose, but the more he, just kind of opened up and kept on. He was great the whole episode, but once we get into all that kind of stuff, it's very, very interesting to hear from an AD's perspective. So I thank him for that. I thank him for coming on. He was a great, great guest. He's an extremely intelligent guy, and he was a heck of a basketball player too. So we get into all that good stuff. So I want to thank Tom Michael for coming on. Great guest, and hope you guys enjoy it. Here we go. All right, everybody. I'm here with former Illini and the current athletic director at Eastern Illinois University, Tom Michael. Tom, how's it going?
I'm outstanding. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know. This is great. I was going to ask you too. We're going to talk about your Illinois days, but when we've been kind of texting back and forth, some of the stuff you're doing, I feel bad. I've even asking you to come on because, you're like, oh, by the way, I'm, in the middle of trying to hire a volleyball coach for Eastern Illinois, so you're doing, so like, I guess I was just kind of wondering, it made me just kind of wonder, as an athletic director at a college, what's, as far as like the schedule and things like that, like how busy are you just year round? Is it, and is it something that's taken you a while to get adjusted to, or is it, you just used to it now since you've been doing it for a while, or how's all that work?
Yeah, well, this is my 11th year that I've been at EIU, and obviously spending 18 years in Champaign after I was done playing. All that time helped prepare me for at least what I thought in 2014 I was prepared to sit in the chair, and then you get an opportunity to sit in the chair, and then it's like, oh, that's what sitting in the chair is all about. And so I don't know, it's whenever you make those moves upward, I don't think it's any different from an assistant coach being a head coach, and you're like, oh, that's what all those responsibilities are when you're now the head coach. All the decisions have to be accountable to you as you run the department or the program or whatever that is. So, in terms of the workload, people will ask, hey, what's your work-life balance? And we really don't have a work-life balance, or at least it's not balanced where both sides are getting equal time. We spend a lot of time doing the job at work. And the thing about that is that, we, and I say we because it's Shanna and everybody else that has to understand and accept all of those things. So, when you're working however many hours a week it is, it's not a 40-hour week, obviously. And so you're working Saturdays and Sundays and in the evenings and different things. But when you enjoy what you're doing, and you're making a difference in student athletes' lives, then it's not nearly as difficult. I don't clock in and clock out. And that's just part of what the job is. And I'm fortunate and blessed that I love to do what I get to do every day. And I tell people that doesn't mean that every day is easy or fun, but you've got issues or problems or whatever that might be, that your job is to try to help find solutions to them and make things better. And that's the enjoyable part of what we get to do.
Right. Yeah, it's I'm sure it's a very demanding job, but very rewarding as well. And and I just think it's when I was talking to you, just the things, it just kind of dawned on me, like, man, it's just the responsibilities and just so many, and it's covering the whole athletic program and everything. So, but yeah, it's awesome that you've been in that position for that long. So, but yeah. But
it's been really good because we've got 21 sports, we've got almost 500 student athletes at EIU, and so I don't know that I don't look at it as, oh my gosh, I've got this huge responsibility. I look at it as we're providing opportunities for a ton of student athletes every year to be able to use sport and whatever athletic team they're competing on as a vehicle and a pathway to help provide them opportunities to be more successful when they leave EIU with a degree in their hand. And that's, that whole core belief and philosophy was instilled in me in 1989 when I got on campus in Champaign-Urbana. And that part has just continued to be the foundation of how I try to at least provide a vision and mission for what we're doing at EIU.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. But we'll get into the good old days now, if you don't mind. So.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I usually start these off, and by the way, like, questions are always to remind about AD stuff too, so I might have to jump back to that later. But
sure.
Let's start with just growing up. Carlisle, is that where you was that K through 12? Is that where you went to school the whole way through?
No, actually K through 8. We lived in a small town. It was about 12 or 14 miles outside of Carlisle. It was actually closer to Centralia, but we were in the Carlisle School District, and I went to a small parochial grade school in a small town, Hoffman, and it's 450 people. And so that's where I went through kindergarten through 8th grade, and then went to Carlisle High School after that. But growing up in a small town has really been an important component, I believe, of who I am and what we're about, and fortunate to be able to have that experience too.
Right. Yes, I'm a very small town. I don't know if you've ever heard of Chrisman, but that's where I graduated from.
Oh yeah.
And then now we go to Shiloh, and that's where I work, and then my son goes. So yes, very small towns, but I love talking to everybody because there's been a lot of guys on here from Chicago, and so. But I guess I'll start off with, when did you, when you were growing up, did you play all sports? Was it, and then when did you really take a liking to basketball and kind of start to figure out that might be able to be something you could do down the road a little bit?
Yeah, well, my dad was the grade school basketball coach, so I started going to basketball practices with him when I'm really, really young, and probably had no business being in the gym, and probably got into more trouble than not. But started going to basketball practices at that point in time. So, there was obviously a heavy influence from my dad on the basketball side. But when you go to a small school, whether that's at Hoffman or whether that's at Carlisle, most of the time people are required to play more than one sport. Now, that being said, I played baseball as well as basketball growing up, and for probably a variety of reasons, after my freshman year in high school, I stopped playing baseball and just concentrated on basketball. And part of that was I couldn't hit the ball. Part of it was I was a pitcher and I hit too many people, and then probably most importantly, I knew I needed to get in the weight room in the spring and not really worry about a sport because I was a pretty thin guy back then, and so there's times when you're like, maybe it would have been nice to play baseball the other 3 years in high school, but then I think the decision worked out to where it was a pretty good decision.
Right. 6'8". So were you always tall? Was it like a big growth spurt kind of out of nowhere, or how did all that work?
No, I would say I was probably tall most of the time. I was probably 6'1" as an eighth grader, and 6'3" as a freshman, and 6'6" as a sophomore, and then 6'8" as a senior. The bigger issue was trying to put on weight when you're at that age, and so that was always a component and part of the reason why I ultimately redshirted my freshman year or my first year at Illinois was because I'm just trying to get bigger and stronger. But the height wise, probably tall most of my time playing ball.
Right. Well, it's back in the days when you were, like the GNC and you take the weight gain and I remember I was scrawny and always trying to put weight on. You'd have that powder that you go to GNC and take that stuff and then everything, and nothing ever worked, it seemed like. But because you're active, when you're young and you just can't put on any weight, it seems like. But when you were, like the grade school, in junior high. So when you played junior high ball, was it just like called Hoffman? What was the name of the junior high school?
It was Trinity Lutheran.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep, and when I was a sixth grader, we won the state championship. I was, you think about at those younger age, 2 years difference is pretty significant. But I was able to play on that team with a lot of good players in the eighth grade, and my dad was the coach then, and we won the state championship at Trinity Lutheran Hoffman, and those things were obviously special to a small town with 450 people when you center it around basketball and sports and athletics like that. Our small town was no different than most small towns, and the success that you growing up in Crispin with basketball, cross country, and all those types of things, the success athletically that small towns have really gives a lot of life to everybody that's a part of it.
Right. Absolutely. We'll get into high school here. Obviously, you were very successful. I looked up some of your stats and stuff in high school, but when you were playing, because obviously you were a really good outside shooter, but when you were in high school, and in Illinois, I think, 6'8", but I think you just a very good outside shooter. Did you play inside and outside, just kind of do basically whatever you wanted in high school, or were you, because if you look at the game now, not a lot of 6'8" guys back then shooting threes. Now, obviously, it's commonplace. But so, were you kind of ahead of your time shooting threes back then, or in high school were you playing on the post, or just kind of doing whatever?
Well, it probably started my sophomore year, and having my dad as a coach, working on the fundamentals of being able to handle the basketball, shooting it the right way, and different things like that. Being a sixth grader playing on the eighth grade team wasn't one of the tallest guys then, so you had to be able to shoot it from the outside. And then as a sophomore, when I started varsity in high school, I was 6'6" and weighed 165 pounds,
Yeah.
and would get broken in half if I played too much inside. So we had a senior that was 6'1" and 200 pounds and just strong as ever, and he was our post guy actually. And then I did shoot it from the outside my sophomore year, and then junior and senior year. Played a little bit of combination of inside and out, but mostly with my back to the basket. Particularly my senior year, we really played a 4-out, 1-in type of offense, and we had guys that could shoot it on the outside, so it was hard not to guard them, and it was difficult to, being 6'8", it was difficult to guard me in the post, and which obviously allowed to have some success to win a state championship my senior year too.
Right. Yeah, I was looking at those 3 games. Those 3 games you had 25, then you had 45 in the semifinal, and 28 in the state championship game. So, is there when you think back to high school, like a certain, I mean, obviously I would assume your favorite game would have to be the, state championship game, but like, is there a favorite game that maybe like a regular season game, or one that people might not think about, or favorite moment you had in high school playing that kind of sticks out besides the obvious winning state?
Yeah, I think it's 36 years ago or whatever it's been. It's been a long time ago when we played, and I think everybody talks about well it was back then. But high school basketball in Southern Illinois, and I think it's still a big deal. But back then, from what I recall and remember, there was always huge crowds when we played, and part of that was because we had a good team. But part of it is that's what the culture was, is that you went out and really supported your local high school team. You that's what you did on a Friday and Saturday night, and you traveled, and so and basketball in Southern Illinois at that time was really good stuff too, and so we had a lot of rivalry games. With Trenton Westland, with Pinckneyville. My junior year, Pinckneyville beat us in the sectional finals at their place, and then they go win the state championship. After we won it in '89, then Trenton Westland, who was in our conference, they come up and they won it. So basketball was really, really good. So there, I think what you remember is just whether it was home or on the road, you always were playing in front of packed gyms and really made that experience for everybody, right? I know it was really a lot of fun for my parents, but it was fun for the community, and it was obviously fun for us to be able to play in front of crowds like that, and really made that experience special. So I don't know if there was like one particular game. You have a triple overtime game my junior year at Trenton Westland when it's standing room only. There's college coaches there because I was getting recruited. Trenton Westland had Paul Lusk and Brett Brady. Paul Lusk ended up signing at Iowa and then finished his career at Southern Illinois. Now he's on Matt Painter's staff at Purdue. I mean, there was a lot of really, really high-level players, and you play in some of those games, and I'm sure there's more if you really think back what that was. But it all culminated to just being an unbelievable experience, and hopefully that was for a lot of people that got to be a part of it, either directly being on the team or indirectly just fans back then that enjoyed high school basketball.
Yes, absolutely. Small town basketball wouldn't, it's great for communities and everything. Well, how about with your recruitment? When did you maybe start hearing from colleges, and maybe which ones? And I some of these recruiting stories I love hearing, but I mean, as far as like any visits, any coaches come to talk to you, like any other college you were considering besides Illinois, and what ultimately led you to Illinois?
Yeah, I can remember getting my first quote unquote recruiting letter in the mail, and it was from Penn State my sophomore year. I think the thing to at least, at Carlisle High School, Phil Kuntz, he was a senior when I was a freshman, and he signed with Illinois and came up to Champaign, and then he ultimately transferred out of Champaign and went to Iowa State. So, my freshman year, I'm in the gym, and Phil was getting recruited in the summer when I was able to come in and play. And so people kind of were able to see me as this skinny incoming freshman, like, hey, he might have a bit of skills. He's pretty tall if he grows, whatever the case might be. So we were exposed to some of those things. So my sophomore year, when you get this letter, your first letter, like, oh, this is how this is going to work. And then you go through that process, and, we didn't have AAU basketball back then. You go to exposure camps, the Blue Chip and 5-star, and you go to these camps and things like that. And then that accelerates different things. But, you're getting, at that point in time, you're getting recruited by everybody around, and you have to try to figure out, hey, what are you gonna narrow this down to? Is it just going to be Big Ten schools? Is it just going to be Power 5 schools, or whatever? What was really important to me, and I kind of touched on some of this, where my family was incredibly important as you go through that process, and I really wanted to stay someplace that my mom and dad could get to the games and watch me play as much as their schedules and time allowed them to do. And so that's how I narrowed my schools down. And when you think about it, my 4 schools at the end were Illinois, Missouri, Carbondale, and Evansville. And I never ended up taking an official visit to Evansville. Jim Cruz was there. And it's ironic how this whole circle comes around, because I hire Marty Simmons as our coach at Eastern Illinois, and he went to Indiana, and then Jim Cruz left Indiana to get the head job at Evansville. Marty transfers to Evansville. Jim Cruz, I talked to Coach Cruz, obviously remember all of those types of things. But ultimately, and I probably, this is honestly the truth, I probably didn't appreciate the roster that Illinois had in 87, and then in the fall of 88 when I signed. Probably didn't appreciate, like you think about it, and like, Jesus Christ, that was the number 1 team ranked in the country for the longest time. They go to the Final Four. They're a rebound putback away from going to the national championship game. And when that's all taking place, that tournament run's taking place, I've already signed with this team that's one of the best teams in the country. And at the time, you probably, I'm quite certain I didn't appreciate that enough. As you look back at it now, and like, holy smokes, that was an incredible time, just to be recruited, to be playing, all those things is really a blessed opportunity that you get to be a part of.
Oh yeah. That's definitely. And so the year that you redshirted, then that was the year after. So it would have been like Kendall Gill's senior year. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. So they still had Kendall and Steve, and Marcus, and Irvin and PJ. You think about that. That was what I practiced against every day was that group, as I'm redshirting, and just, super, super high level basketball.
Right. I was going to ask you too, like, what do you think? Okay, advantages and disadvantages of playing, like in a smaller town, like a Class A school, as opposed to like a Peoria Manual or a Chicago school, something like that. Like, what do you think the advantages and disadvantages are of that, like, as it translates to getting into college or playing in college?
Yeah, well, I only have obviously one perspective of it in terms of what I was able to experience, and at the time, high school basketball was probably a little bit different. We played in the whatever was one of the premier shootouts in the country at the time. We played in the 7-Up shootout in St. Louis, where they have all the top teams in the country come and play. So we got to be exposed to that. And then there's all these other shootouts that are going on where they're setting up, teams against different teams in the state. And we were able to play in 3 or 4 of those my senior year. So, we didn't play against high level basketball every night, but we played against a bunch of it. And then, is the transition different? Yeah. It was different that when I walk into my first class in Follinger Auditorium and there's 1,200 people in an Econ 101 class. I mean,
Yeah.
I have 450 people in the town that I lived in. My high school graduating class had 88 people in it.
Right.
So all of that is like a wow moment, but at the same time, I think at the end it's basketball being able to play basketball, and we were able to play, and we had small town guys that I played with throughout my career, and TJ's one of them.
Right.
Buckner, I think, is smaller than Hoffman was, where he grew up, and he wouldn't say that today, but
Yeah.
I still would jab him on that. So, I think is there some advantages playing at a 4A school versus, or a double A school at the time, and we were 1A and they were double A, and I roomed with Deion Thomas my freshman year in the dorms, and so yeah, I'm sure there's some advantage there, but at the same time, it was always kind of a chip that we wore. I think being one from Southern Illinois, and being two from a small school that people didn't think you could play. And
Right.
that was always a little bit of a chip, like, we can still put the ball in the hoop, and we can still do some things too. So, we tried to, I think it was something that, and it probably started a little bit with Steve, being a senior when I got in there. He was proud of being from Southern Illinois too. And so you want to try to make sure that you represent, downstate in a positive and productive manner too.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was going to ask, okay, so you show up and you're redshirting, but I would say I was going to ask what the biggest adjustment was from high school to college for you, but I mean, I would say obviously just having to get in the weight room, things like that. But besides that, was there anything you noticed when you got there to practice, started running up and down with these guys? Like, what was the biggest adjustment, like, as far as besides just the strength part, like, that you noticed?
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious piece is that, especially with the group that I, would come in and fall, and Nick Anderson is still working out. He just goes through the draft, and
Right.
you've got Ken Norman that comes back and is lifting in the weight room, and Snake was a monster when he played. He was a not monster when he was done, and I think he's still a monster now, just in terms of his physique, So
Yeah.
you got those guys, and you're like, holy smokes, this is a super high level, and then again, those seniors that were off that Final Four team that were still in that practice every day. I mean, there were some phenomenal basketball players that sometimes you pinch yourself and like, what am I doing in the gym with these guys? Like, as a 6'8", 195-pound freshman. And so those were some hard days, on the court, because you're getting your tail kicked, every day in some way, shape, or fashion. But you either run after it and try to keep getting better, or some folks would go the other way and say, hey, I can't do this anymore. And, we were fortunate to be able to fight through a lot of that and to keep trying to get better.
Yeah. For people that might not know, like anybody kind of younger listening to this, like, okay, back then when you redshirted, can you just maybe describe what, like, the kind of things that you would do during your redshirt year, to maybe explain that a little bit to younger people?
Yeah, I would tell you that it's the best decision that I made,
Right.
in terms of part of what happened in my 5 years playing ball, because I needed to get in the weight room. I lifted every day during the season and everything. Coach Nagy, he was the main recruiter for me. And we had a lot of conversations. If you're going to redshirt, you need to do that. So I was on a different lift schedule than everybody else on the team. I was in there every day, so I would lift either before or after practice. Then I would go practice, and just really tried to take advantage of that redshirt year in every way possible of the workouts and in the weight room to try to get ready for my redshirt freshman year. And you're balancing classes, but I didn't travel to all the road games because that would impact my lift piece. So obviously there for all the home games and participating in everything, but didn't go on all the road trips just because of that day and a half or whatever you might be gone. Would be difficult to get lifts in, and it was just more important to be on campus and get in the weight room with strength coach and get those workouts in.
Yeah. How much weight did you put on? Do you remember from during that 1 year?
Yeah, it was probably close to 20 pounds that first year. And then the heaviest I got was about 238. Something like that is what the heaviest I got when I played. It'd be nice to try to get down to that now, but I really felt like at 235 was probably the right weight that I needed to play, trying to still be able to certainly never quick enough or jump high enough, but that 235 was probably a more ideal place for me to be where I felt like I could be most productive.
Gotcha. All right, well, let's get into these years here. So your first year, your freshman year, and I'm not even going to get into all of I had Dion on and I've had TJ on. I've actually had TJ on like a couple times. I had him on once, then I had him at Riggs Brewery and we did like a pregame thing, and he gives his enough thoughts for everybody, I feel like, out of that whole group, because when it comes to all the, like, why you, like, the probation and all that kind of stuff, blah, blah. We won't get all that. But your first year, though, I mean, you're getting 16, 17 minutes a game, so you're getting plenty of playing time. And then you guys, as a team, were, again, 21-10, 11-7 in the conference, but then now that was the year that you weren't eligible for postseason, correct?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. But then your sophomore year, 12.5 points a game and shot 49% from three, that's just crazy for you just don't hear numbers like that, especially in college ball. But maybe talk about that year a little bit. Because I'm just looking at your stats right now. 12.5 points, 4.6 rebounds. So that's a great year. You played 31 minutes a game, so you were a huge part of that team. So maybe talk about your sophomore year a little bit.
Yeah, you get in a situation, and look, I'm fortunate too that you get a chance to play with Dion, who's the all-time leading scorer in Illinois basketball history. Kiwan Garris, later on get to play with him, and I don't know, is he number 2 or number 3 all-time leading scorer. I'm fortunate to be able to play with guys that could really do some things. Played with Rennie Clemens, who's the best point guard that I ever played with. Rennie understood, that he could put a tremendous amount of pressure on defense with his ability to drive the basketball. But he wasn't a scoring first point guard, and he knew that I was going to be spotting up on the arc, and when he got it to me, there was probably a good chance that he was going to get an assist because he was drawing the defense in. It wasn't because, I was making any kind of crazy play. It was, my man had to help. And it created space for me to be able to shoot the basketball. Right. And
that's a great feeling.
Yeah,
knowing you're gonna get, have that driving kick when you're out there. Yeah, that's a great feeling. It's like, and I remember, he's somebody that doesn't get brought up very much, when you think about past players. But if I remember right, not the best shooter, but just real, like, very athletic, and. Was a very, very productive point guard while he was there. But it's just somebody that, you don't hear about as often when people are talking about former players and stuff. But Rennie was good.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed playing with him because he was tough. He stuck his nose in there. And like I said, he found ways to get me the basketball, and allowed me to have some open looks and got it to me, where I needed to have the ball to get the ball released. And that's part of the reason why I was able to, have the year shooting wise, and I don't know, whatever it was, 70 some 3-pointers that you make, and you shoot it at that clip, and hopefully that also made it more productive for Dion in the post, and being able to feed him the post, and then also that they couldn't necessarily help off as much either. So it was a lot of fluidity. We just, we didn't win a lot of games, and that the part of that probation piece, I know we don't want to get into that, but part of what made that challenging. Well, part of the thing that made that challenging was obviously the year before we couldn't go to the tournament, but they took scholarships away.
Right.
And that was the point. That was the part, and then having the opportunity to go back when Coach Kruger took over the program in '96. I thought it really took that long into '97, '98 before the impact of losing those scholarships really was able to get back on track. So that was as big of a problem for us as anything, is when I think they took 2 scholarships away from us for that investigation thing. So that was the tough part about that year. I personally had a pretty good year shooting the basketball or whatever the case was, but we didn't win enough ball games, and that at the end of the day is what you're trying to do is how do you get to the tournament, and then how do you try to win some games in the tournament. So that's probably the part that is the downside to certainly that year that we had.
Right.
And I would also say my freshman year, the first year, after I redshirted, we had Larry Smith that came back. So after the Final Four year, like my redshirt year, Larry wasn't on campus. Then he was able to come back. And his leadership that year and what Larry Smith did, without, because he was in the same class with Steve and Kendall and Nick and Irvin and that big class there. Larry was part of that class. And for him to come back with none of those guys, Larry was a huge reason, and his maturity, for me as a freshman, was really good because he wasn't afraid to hold people accountable too. And Larry was a big piece to all of that.
Right. Yeah. You're not the first person that said that. He was, and he's from Alton.
Yeah.
Right? So, well, we haven't talked about Coach Henson yet, but one thing I was going to say before we get into Coach Henson, well, this is about Coach Henson, but okay, you're 6'8", and did he try to turn you into something maybe that you weren't, because you're a great shooter from the outside, but I've heard a lot of other guys that I've talked to, like Dion saying like you wouldn't let him shoot outside at all, like you get inside, you're 6'9". Did he try to do that with you, or did he just realize what a great shooter you were, so he didn't try to get you on the block or anything like that? Did he just kind of, like, how did he coach you when you got there?
Yeah, I'm obviously I'm not going to jump up over people and score in the post, and
but
I don't have
6'8" though, but
Yeah, but at the same time at that level, and then I wasn't just a power super strong guy down on the post. So I think he realized that that's not where I was going to be successful, and then I was able to demonstrate that I could shoot it from the outside. And so, from that perspective, I think he allowed that. The part that was challenging for me is, whatever the case was, I wasn't a guy that was getting 10 rebounds every game. And so that probably made it a little bit more challenging because, Dion wasn't a banger, either in the post. Dion was more of a finesse back to your basket guy. turn and face and had a super high release on the jump shot and things like that. But Dion wasn't a big physical banging big guy either, especially for the Big Ten.
Yep. Are you still there?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha. Good. I thought it was. Okay. I asked this question to Dion and TJ, and you're played with them, so I'll see what you say. Like, Fletch, the strength guy at Illinois now, that he's their strength coach, and he does a wonderful job, and he's hardcore and everything. So I asked TJ, I'm like, do you think Dion would have been a lottery pick if he had Fletch as his strength coach back then? And then I asked Dion the same question, and one of them said yes, and one of them said no. So, like, do you think that, like, because TJ just said no, like he didn't think he would work hard enough, but and then Dion's like, I absolutely would have been a lottery pick if I would have had Fletch as my strength coach and all this. So, do you think that if so he said so? I mean, what do you think? Did he have the talent if he would have been just in the weight room more? Somebody would really push him and made him get in the weight room to be a lottery pick, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all would look back on it to some degrees, right? And say, if Fletch would have been our guy, if we would have had the facilities. I was talking to some people last weekend, and I'm like, you know what? We practiced in Huff my freshman year. When I got to campus, we were doing fall open gyms, and we were doing them in Huff. They still had the old basketball standards. So this was before women's basketball moved in there with Teresa Grants and put in the baskets that dropped from the ceiling. Had these old portable ones that still had they had a partial glass backboard, but at the bottom where the rim was attached, that was still wood. Yeah. They had concrete blocks on the back of it so it didn't tip. You dunk it, and the back of the thing would come up a little bit, and you'd have to scoot the basketball standard. But that's where we practiced. And then if somehow we couldn't go in Huff, then we would walk over to Impey, and we would practice in Impey, and we would sometimes we'd be in the gym where this was a long time ago, right? This is when there was only 2 gyms, and sometimes we'd get both of those courts. But then we would be in the big gym where there was 4, and we would only get 2. There wasn't any curtain. So we're running a Division I Big Ten practice on 2 of those courts, and then there's other dudes that are getting runs in on the other 2. Yeah. And you just think about some of those things. So my point with Fletch would be is if you had a guy like Fletch, if you had a facility like Ubben and all of those types of things, we would probably all be a little bit different than who we were back then. But at the same time, I would also tell you that we had a weight room to work out in. We had a strength coach that put a program together for us and did some of these things. It was probably just a different time in some of those regards, and I wouldn't say, I don't want to make it sound like we didn't have the support of a weight room and a strength coach. We didn't have one that was just dedicated like Fletch is just for the team now and what he's able to do. But Dion was a super talented guy, a super talented basketball player. Obviously, he started all 4 years and scored a ton of points and all of those things. And Dion would have had a want to get in the weight room, and wanted and would have had to want to get bigger and stronger. But he was super skilled. And if he was built a little differently, whether that was stronger or a little bit bigger, who knows where it could have been, but yeah. I think his career at Illinois ended up being pretty good.
Oh yeah, definitely. He was if you ever get a chance, when I had him on, he gave some really good, honest answers about stuff, and he was about what he wishes he would have done a little different and stuff. It was really good. But so with Coach Henson, what were your thoughts? I mean, how was your relationship with him? Because I'm sure you can imagine I've gotten a wide variety of answers. So personally, how was your relationship with him? How did you kind of view him as a coach and his style and things like that? And then, how was your relationship after you got done playing and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I would say that at the time when you're playing, you really don't have a different perspective. And I use this example all the time with our coaches and our student athletes today that I talk to and that I work with is that back when I played, if Coach Henson told us to run through the wall, you better run through the wall. And you don't ask any questions. You just do what you're told and do it. And now today, the kid is going to say, well, but there's a door right there. Why do you want me to run through the wall when I can just go through the door? And it doesn't make the question bad. It means that we just have to explain things more today than maybe we did 35 years ago.
Yes.
And so again, that's not bad. We just have to be prepared to explain it why you want them to go through the wall. And I don't know, maybe we weren't smart enough to ask that question. Or the reality of it is back then you just did what you were told, and that was it.
Right.
So I probably at the time you didn't really know any difference. Coach Henson was all about basketball. Coach Henson was a phenomenal basketball mind. And I have this conversation with Coach Coombs, who I talk to pretty frequently, that I'm not so sure that Coach Henson could have coached today.
Right.
Or the way he did back then, I'm quite certain he couldn't have. He would have had to adjust. Could he have adjusted? And, the phrase I use today with our coaches is I believe you can still coach kids hard today, but you have to be prepared to love them hard. And if you're not prepared to love them hard, then you can't coach them hard today. I don't know that back then with Judd Heathcote, Lou Henson, Gene Cady, Bob Knight, Bill Frieder, Clem Haskins, all these guys who are legends in Big Ten basketball coaching.
Not only very intense, but also like some characters. The coaches back then were just great. They're just lots of different strong personalities and coached hard, and it was the good old days kind of. But
yeah, but you wouldn't have ever told any of those guys that you got to love your guys hard.
Right, exactly. Yes.
It's just you coach them hard, and if you can't be coached hard, then you better go find a different program because this is the way we're going to coach you every day. And today you can't do that. So I don't know. Coach would have adapted some, but I don't know if he could have adapted because it was all basketball. It was every conversation you had with him revolved around basketball in some way, shape, or form. And he was extremely talented basketball coach, in regards to that. And so, I still, Mark and I had a conversation. I don't know if it was earlier this week or last week. We had a conversation about my press conference and how Coach was at my press conference. When I got introduced as the AD at EIU, and I've got the picture on my wall, with him sitting in the audience, and with Ron Gunther and Lou Henson are there, and Mark is there obviously too, and just the comment that came up because Mark said, hey, Coach would have been very, very proud of you, what you've been able to do through a lot of difficult situations at EIU, and kind of gives you goosebumps because, I think when you're a student athlete and you play at this level and do different things, part of it is that you want to please the people who you're playing for. And that certainly was the case. I made a decision to play for Coach Henson, and he gave me an opportunity, and it continues to open doors today, but I wanted to please him, and 31 years later, to hear Mark say that, hey, Coach would have been really, really proud of you, kind of gives you goosebumps and obviously makes you feel pretty good, that you represented the opportunity that he gave me and have tried to make the most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great that he was at your press conference too. We had the exhibition game here. It was Brad's first game that he coached at Illinois, and we hosted him. And got a picture with Coach and I sitting in the bleachers talking and things like that, and those are pretty special moments because again, like I said, he gave me an opportunity
to come to Champaign, to play at the U of I, to play super high level basketball, to leave there with 2 degrees in my hand, and have success in college athletics. That if he doesn't give me that opportunity, I don't get these opportunities that I have right now too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you think about playing at Illinois, is there a kind of like with the high school deal? Is there a favorite game or a favorite about think of it from a team standpoint, like a favorite game, and think about maybe from an individual standpoint, like a favorite game or favorite moment or anything?
Yeah, I don't know. I think about, I don't know if there's a favorite piece in regards to what that is. Obviously there's games when you shoot it in a lot and it go, things like that. But to be honest with you, I don't remember. I don't dwell on a lot of that stuff. Like I said, the part that kind of is that kind of is frustrating is that we didn't win enough my sophomore year. We should have went to the tournament our freshman year, and then junior and senior year we get there. Senior year, I think we're an 8-9 seed with Georgetown, and
looking at that right now, yeah.
That's probably the piece where you say like, man, you go to the Final Four in '89, and for a variety of reasons, right? I mean, it'd be easy for me to say today that it's all based on the NCAA, it's all based on this investigation, but we probably didn't take advantage of getting to the Final Four in '89. Maybe the way you should use that as a springboard. So that's probably just a little disappointing for me as being part of that. But then the flip side of that is you realize how good the Big Ten was then. I think about the opportunity that you get to play against Shaquille O'Neal, you get to play against Glenn Robinson, you get to play against Chris Webber, you get to play against like 4 number 1 draft picks in the NBA when I'm at Illinois. And like, it's just like, I mean, that's crazy stuff.
Yeah, and you got a state championship from a school that was 450 people, and you know what I mean? When you're in junior high, now it's great,
Yeah. So all of those things, and then to say you get to go back up there, and I get to spend 18 years. I've spent 23 years on that campus. Is just a phenomenal opportunity too, and that's how I really look at it, is as I'm blessed to have that opportunity, because I know, and maybe it's because of the 29 years now I spent in athletic administration, that there's no entitlement in regards to that's a special thing that I was fortunate to be able to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of some of those number 1 draft picks and just things like that, how about
Glenn Robinson was another one. I'm sorry, didn't even mention Big Dog when he was at Purdue. Yeah,
he was amazing. Who's the toughest guy you had to guard?
Well, I mean,
or just one that gave you, or one that you're laying on that maybe gave you a little more, because I had Richard Keene on, and and there's like Calbert Chaney and there's Glenn Robinson and stuff like that. He said his was Sean Respert because he had to go through about 15 picks every, and so is there anybody like that kind of really, when you were guarding him, we're like, oh boy, here we go?
Yeah, I would say it would have been like somebody like Calbert Chaney. Calbert Chaney was because he could get you his baseline jump shot, being left-handed. I mean, and Coach Knight ran a motion offense, so you're trying to get switch and you got to come together, and they were so efficient at it, and they flipped screens and everything like that. But Calbert Chaney was a son of a gun, certainly, to do that. And then the teams, that they had at Ohio State, they won back-to-back Big Ten championships with Jimmy Jackson and that crew, Chris Gent and Jamal Brown and
like a Treg Lee. Treg Lee is that the right name? Real big guy,
just a monster. I mean, he was just super, super strong and just a son of a gun, and maybe not real skilled offensively, but he defended and rebounded and set screens, and you knew when you ran into that one. So yeah, there was, I mean, just you think about that league, and you don't, like, I hate being the guy, and I hate to talk too much about in my role now as an athletic director. Well, back when I played,
I know.
You hate
But
to
this
do
is that's what this pod's for. So just have at it, you know.
Yeah, but that being said, you think about what Big Ten basketball was in the mid '80s to the mid '90s, and it's pretty good again. But there was a stretch where Big Ten basketball wasn't very good. But that stretch from the mid '80s to the mid '90s ish. I mean, man, it was really, really good basketball up and down, and you know, you felt like if you win your home games and you steal a couple road games, you could compete for a Big Ten championship.
Right.
And you didn't have to go undefeated. You didn't have to try to make it through with only 2 losses. You know, when you went on the road that every game was going to be just a son of a gun, and you'd be lucky if you got out of some place with a road win.
Right. I feel like the best teams in the country back then, like if it was us, like that final, if you took care of business at home and could go like 500 on the road, then you're probably one of the top 5 teams in the country. You know what I mean? Like if you know, okay, well, you're kind of a tweener though. So did you guard posts more? Or did you guard like wings more?
Yeah, that was always probably a little bit of a problem trying to find somebody that I could guard. But no, it was probably, and it was probably, you're right, I was like a 3.5. And maybe at that time, the stretch for the pick and pop guy, that you see so prevalent now was probably in the early form of that, a little bit, because that's my junior and senior year. Probably my sophomore year played more of a 3, and then junior, senior year played more of a 4, in regards to some of that pick and pop action to try to, you know, see if somebody would come out and guard and take advantage of some of those types of things.
Yeah. I don't get too sidetracked, but you were talking about all those picks and things like that. What are your thoughts on kind of the way the game has changed here the last handful of years, where the quote unquote positionless basketball and things like that? What are your thoughts on that, or do you like the old school way where we got sets and we do things like?
You know, this is probably a separate podcast, in regards to some of those things. I think the positionless basketball piece could be effective if at the younger levels, kids were taught how to play basketball the right way and understood the fundamentals and understood what a shell drill was and understood what jumping to the basketball would be. And at the Division I level, at the college level, you know, they come to this point and they don't know all of those things. They don't know how to set a screen and use a screen, and when to curl and when to flare and what the angles mean and ball spacing and things like that. So positionless basketball would be great if that was the case. But with this 30-second shot clock, you know, we played with 45 a bit and we played with 35, but with the 30-second shot clock, you know, there's not a lot of opportunities to run a lot of sets, because if you can stop ball reversal, you shut a set down anyway. And then when the shot clock's down, it just ends up so much setting a high ball screen, reading off the ball screen and see what you can come out of that. Because that's what happens when the shot clock gets down. So that's done it. And then, you know, Steph Curry's an unbelievable player, an unbelievable shooter, maybe the best shooter that the game's ever seen. But his game has changed everything too, to where, you know, I can remember, TJ would attest to this, but when we were shooting 3-pointers, if you weren't right at the line, Coach Henson was on your tail. Like, it doesn't count anymore if you're 6 inches away from the line. Like, get right to the line. So shooting a shot that's 2 or 3 feet behind the 3-point line, especially if you missed it, you're going to hear about it in a big time way. And now you take one shot or one pass and people are shooting 27-foot 3-point shots, and it just, you know, I'm hoping there's a day when that 49% record gets broken. But with the frequency that they're taking 3-pointers, the distance that they're shooting 3-pointers, I don't know if it will. I hope somebody breaks it, because that means they're having a great year as a team, and somebody is shooting it in at a good clip, and I hope that happens sometime soon. But I just don't know the style of play and the way the 3-point shot is valued today. It's almost like we've got to be a volume 3-point shooting team more so than taking good 3-pointers.
Right. Yeah, don't hold your breath on that record getting broken, because I feel even now it's like if the team leading the Big Ten or leading, who was it? So whoever's leading the NBA in 3-point percentage, it's like as a team it's like 38. It's just, I don't know. I'm all about, like, I like sets, but they're like quick hitters, or like things like you gotta have a few of those in your, even if you are doing positionless basketball, you gotta have a few of those. But yeah, I like I like calling plays, running plays, and getting, because I don't know, I just do. But yeah, with Steph, it's like great player, but man, he's ruined a lot of kids growing up, because they're not, like, you can't do it. So just stop trying. Just listen to your coaches and learn fundamentals, because you can't do that. Like, not every, he's a unicorn with that stuff. But
well, I ask all the time, like, is it really that hard to recruit kids that can shoot the ball in the hole?
Yeah,
with a talent to be able to put the ball in the hole, but it's frustrating when it seems like being able to shoot the basketball is a lost art.
Yeah, definitely. And you don't have to dribble 6 times to do and then shoot it. Just, you should be able to get wherever you got to get in about 2 or 3 dribbles. You know what I mean? That's just old. That's just me being an older guy now. But like, you don't. James, don't, like James Harden and guys like that. Don't watch that, because it's just dribble. So I feel like
it's a more ball dominated style right now, and as opposed to catching and sweep the ball and see what's there. And Marty talks about 0.5 seconds. You got 0.5 seconds to try to know what you're going to do. When you catch it, you've got to react to the situation, not sit, think, dribble, and all these other things. And the game is certainly much different. I hate to fall into this trap of, well, back when we played, or the old thing. You hate to fall into that, but at the same time, it sure seems like it was pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I wasn't meaning to get into all that, but man, it's just sometimes when we get started, and I like listening to other guys' thoughts on it too. But well, whenever you were, one thing I like asking guys too. Okay, what was your favorite, like Big Ten back in the day, like these road games? What was your favorite, like, place to play, like, on the road? Was there like a certain arena gym you liked the most, or anything, or funnest place?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I don't know if my numbers would suggest this. I have no idea. I haven't gone back and thought about that or anything like that. Obviously, like playing in the assembly hall, and because you practiced in there so much, I thought it was a pretty good place to shoot the basketball. But I also thought on the road, it doesn't mean that this was an easy place to play, but the Breslin Center was new, and it seemed like for me, it seemed like a pretty good place to shoot in. The Assembly Hall at Indiana was probably one of the most difficult places to shoot in for me.
Yeah.
Just the sight lines, back then they had the goals with, it wasn't the traditional modernized goal. It had the two arms on the sides, and just optically, it was different. And for me as a shooter, that visual, and then the sides are so damn steep. It just messed with my vision in some ways, and didn't feel like I shot the ball well there. And I've been back there when I was working at Illinois, and now we've had an opportunity to play games there, both on the men's and women's side. And I go in there, and I'm like, man, this still screws with my vision of what this looks like, when you look at the basket. Did
you like playing at Minnesota?
It it wasn't a big. I think that people make a bigger issue out of the floor being raised than anything. So I don't know that it was that big of a deal really once you got playing. Wasn't it just the thing that I remember there more about the floor being raised is it seemed like they had a huge scoreboard and then it was lower. That there just wasn't a lot of height. Usually at a big arena that thing is considerably off the floor, and it just seemed that one like I don't know if TJ's past Andy Kaufman would have worked at Minnesota.
Gotcha. Yeah. I surprised you didn't mention that. I feel like everybody from that era, like whenever I talked about it, they've all mentioned that.
I'm not giving TJ any credit for making that pass. There's no way I'm going to mention that game and give TJ any credit for that.
He gives himself plenty, so you don't have to.
That is for sure. I still talk to TJ about every day, so.
Yeah. He oh no, I'm not talking to him anymore. But like I was going to ask too, whenever you, as far as teammates go, though, is there anybody that you can think of that maybe, we've talked about Dion, TJ, you talked about Ronnie Clemens. Is there anybody that maybe people don't think about quite as much that you felt like was a big part of things back then, that like kind of like a glue guy or anything like that kind of you can think of, or no?
Oh, I don't know. It's a good question. Probably that'll be one I think about for a while, and then I'm like, you know what, that guy was pretty good. I mean, TJ and I had this conversation last week, I think, about what we don't do a good job of, and it's just unfortunate that we don't. But we talked about we got to get some guys back, whether that's the spring or the summer, just to see guys, because I'm going to be 54 here in a few days, and time goes by pretty quickly, and pretty soon, we're going to get together for the wrong reasons, and I say that from the perspective of I had an opportunity to play with a lot of really good guys, and to not be able to stay in touch with them as much because of all these other things that people have going on, right? Just isn't good. And I hope that we can all find a way to get together and just reminisce and just see each other again, and just be able to hang out a bit.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess we've already I kind of buried the lead with the athletic director stuff, but I always ask guys, maybe let the fans know everything, what you've been up to, which they already know, but maybe after your playing days were over, what all you've been up to, I guess, leading up to the athletic director position.
Yeah, when I finished playing in '94, I had earned my master's degree in sports admin, and Shannon and I were married, and we had our oldest, Nick, at the time. And so you're trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do as a family, and different things like that. My parents owned a couple lumberyards in Southern Illinois, so we ended up going down there for 2 years, 20 months, whatever it was. And I'd grown up in the lumberyard business, so I knew what I was getting into. But it was completely different when you go there and work full time, as opposed to going there working on Saturdays and in the summer and whatever the case is, and just hated it. I mean, I hated it, and had an opportunity, stayed in touch with folks at Illinois. A couple people I just saw Mike Hatfield today, and he was in academics, then tickets, and then he finished in development when he retired from the athletic department. But I stayed in touch with people, and then when Coach Henson retired and Coach Kruger was hired, they were looking for a new academic counselor. And academics wasn't what I wanted to really get into, but it was an opportunity for me to get my foot in the door in college athletics, and then particularly at my alma mater. So in '96, I had an opportunity to come back and then work with Coach Kruger, and Coach Kruger is as good of a human being, as good of a person, got a ton of respect for who he is and what he's done, accomplished in his basketball career, but had an opportunity to come back in '96. And then, I also then get a chance to work with Ron Gunther for 15 years. And, if people would look at what we're doing at EIU, they would say it's just a miniature version of Illinois when Ron was there in terms of our core values and beliefs, philosophies, how we go about things, what our priorities are. Even though they've shifted some, in this chaotic world we live in, but being able to work for Ron for 15 years was as good of preparation as I could have, and then to be there for a lot of crazy stuff. It's you get to go to the Sugar Bowl when you're there, you go to the Rose Bowl when you're there, you go to the championship game. In basketball, you get to see a ton of incredible things, and if you looked at that time period that you were a part of, it's a pretty significant piece in Illinois athletic history, and knowing that you were involved or a part of it in some small way, and then hopefully, as I got the opportunity in 14 to come down to Charleston and do what we're doing here at EIU, and knowing that whole, like, I'm super proud of being a product of Illinois and Illinois basketball and all of that, and knowing that you're still kind of representing that component of it. And Josh and I are we're on a committee of 18 individuals in Division I with the NCAA. It's a Division I decision-making working group, and there's 18 individuals. There's 5 ADs on it, and Josh and I are 2 of the 5. And to think this working group that consists of representing 356 Division I institutions, and 2 of the 5 ADs have Illinois ties, backgrounds, et cetera, that are going to be a part of providing some input on the direction and how college athletics, Division I athletics, are going to be made. And I'm not trying to overplay what we're doing, and Josh's voice being in the Big Ten is certainly very, very powerful, but to be sitting at a table, and that's what I'm thinking of, is not that, hey, it's Tom Michael and Josh Whitman, but it's 2 people that have been really formed and shaped on the values of what Illinois is about. We're at this table, and I think it says a lot about Illinois, and that's the most important thing. It's not about Tom Michael. It's about, we're representing what Illinois has helped form and shape us into, and I think that's what I hope, as being an alum of the U of I would be something that's pretty good.
Yeah, well, that's extremely impressive that you 2 are both there. That's amazing. But with the job you have now, is okay with the way the landscape's changing with everything. Obviously, I don't even need to say it, but like with transferring NIL, all that kind of stuff. Like, are you? How much does that affect you at Eastern? And maybe I don't want this to take forever because I know I've taken a lot of your time, but I mean, like, just a few quick little thoughts on that a little bit and how it's impacted things the last few years for you.
Yeah, it's really and I think it's at Eastern Illinois, and I think it's at the University of Illinois. It has really flipped things on its head in college athletics, and it's never been more chaotic. Whether you're talking about NIL and where's that line of pay for play, where's the line of employer status, and then you have this transfer portal mess that there's no loyalty. I'm concerned about fan fatigue. We're in our last week of our regular season at EIU, and I'm sure that people still are looking at their at the scorecard to see who our guys are. It changes. The rosters change so much, and people are like, well, the transfer portal impacts EIU more than it does Illinois. Brad's got 10 new guys,
Yeah.
you know, and we opened up with them like, man, they got a chance to be pretty good, but let's see where they're at the end of January. Can he get them all to gel? That's the piece that this recruiting, like I started getting recruited by Dick Nagy, the summer of my sophomore year. So they got to know every cotton picking thing about me over the
Right.
next 2 years. Now, when you go in the portal, you're recruiting a kid in 48 to 72 hours.
Yeah.
And you're trying to find out if he's coachable. Does he love being in the gym? Does he compete? Is he a winner? You can look at some tape and determine if he can play, but those intangible things, who is he in the locker room? Is he going to be a guy that just tears the locker room apart? And those things, the opportunity to miss on recruiting right now is at an all-time high. And you know, I have no idea how you fix that or how you get that to be better, because you don't have time. The kid goes in the portal, and if you think there's a fit, you better get on him, and you better get him to campus, and you better get him to commit. Otherwise, somebody else is going to swoop in
Right.
and get it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, it takes time to. I mean, that's the thing. I've talked about this with a lot of people. I've never looked at it like that. It's like you've got about 2 or 3 days to try to figure out. And you know, it's a cliche that everybody uses this word, but cultures should be huge, and you have no idea because there's no way you can find all that out in such a short amount of time. You know, that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, then also, I feel like it's almost like high school kids too. Getting recruited is totally different now. So I don't know. I think Richard Keene was saying it's almost like, okay, you got the high school kids and they go, because his boy's going to Montana State next year, he said.
Oh, he is. Okay.
Yeah. So then you've got that, and then it's almost like the EIUs and the mid majors are almost like feeders to, you know, you do have a couple good years there, then you try to go to a Power 5 conference, something like that. So like the high schoolers aren't getting recruited as much, and it's just a crazy situation, you know. I mean, I don't know how they can. I'm not obviously I'm not smart enough, but I don't know. I feel like if the transferring, maybe you transfer once, you can play the next year. If you try transferring again, maybe you have to sit a year. I don't know if that would be something that could help or not, but I mean.
Well, yes, I think the answer to that would clearly be yes. But here's the problem where we're at in our society, is that any time the NCAA makes a decision, and I could argue that I'm not completely thrilled with how the NCAA has operated, certainly over the 34 years that I've been involved in the NCAA. However, every decision that the NCAA makes right now, somebody's taking them to court. The NCAA has a line item in their budget that they spend $60 million a year on legal fees.
Jeez. Yeah.
And so to your point about the transferring, you know, and the crazy part about it is most of the lawsuits that are being brought against the NCAA are being brought against them by their membership, by people who have said, we want to be part of the NCAA. And then, but there's a rule, but we don't like it, so we're going to sue you. So on the transfer piece, it's when we said, hey, you can only transfer one time.
Yeah.
And you can be eligible. And then the West Virginia went to their attorney general and they sued, and then the judge on that lawsuit said, if a normal student can transfer as many times as they want, and as long as they're meeting progress towards degree and so on and so forth, they can transfer. So why are we limiting that to a student athlete? And so since a normal student can do that, then a student athlete shouldn't be penalized by saying you can only transfer X number of times. Now, I completely disagree with it. I'm adamant against that, and so on and so forth, because there's other factors that are in place. One, student athlete transfer rate is considerably higher than a normal student, and then there becomes money involved in it that entices that piece to take place more often than it doesn't too, and a variety of other reasons. But that's part of our issue where we're at in college athletics is every decision that's made. Hey, I went to junior college, and now I can't make as much money, NIL money, so now I'm going to sue because my junior college time shouldn't count against my eligibility. I'm like, well, as long as you're enrolled in classes, why don't we just say people can stay in college for as long as they want, as long as they're a student?
Yeah.
I mean, is that what's next?
Yeah.
I sure hope not, but
Yeah.
yeah, we need to get, and I don't know if that's congressional help or what, but we do need to get some assistance to stop this constant suing anytime you don't get your way.
Yeah. No kidding. Man. Yeah. Well, then with like NIL, it's like people, like everybody's like, well, you need to cap it, but just like you're talking with transfer, how good luck. I mean, I I have no idea how things like that, I mean, everybody can say those things, but making them actually happen is a whole other story. I mean,
Well, and to that point, there's this House settlement that's going to come, and that decision is going to be made on April 7th. And that's obviously going to allow people to revenue share, and the Power Fours are going to revenue share up to $20.5 million. That's their cap space and all this other stuff. But
yeah.
I can tell you on April 8th, there will be a number of lawsuits that are being filed for Title IX, and then there's going to be a ton of lawsuits that are being filed because they have roster caps and they're going to eliminate walk-on opportunities. There's going to be a ton more lawsuits that take place, that right after that settlement is announced, that's going to just continue to make it spin out of control.
Jeez. Yeah.
So the next few months are going to continue to be very, very interesting in college athletics.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's something else. You remember back when you were playing, if you transferred, it was a huge deal,
Well, you had to sit out a year in
right.
basketball.
But I mean, it was pretty rare. Like you had to be real, either unhappy or something had to be going on for somebody even to transfer, and now it's just, man, oh, and God, just Lord, I don't want to keep going, but, and then during the NCAA tournament and during the college football playoff, you're allowed to transfer or like while the playoff's going on, so you're like the Penn State backup quarterback, they're in the college football playoff and he announces he's transferring, when he can't play in the playoff. It's just, there's so many layers to things. It's just crazy, but
yeah, it's almost like you're trying to solve a 12-sided, not a 6-sided Rubik's Cube, but you're trying to solve a 12-sided Rubik's Cube. And,
yeah.
Or you pull one lever and you've got this lever system that you're trying to balance out, and you pull one lever and then it sends 3 levers all out of whack with it. So,
right.
yeah, it's a complicated piece, and I think there's just so many darn good things about college athletics and being able to get an education and use sport for that, for the 98% of the people that aren't going to play professional sports, that I hope we just don't screw this up too much, and we're able to keep it centered. And the phrase that I use very frequently is that we're losing the value of the education in all of this, and I feel like I was on top of the world when I left Illinois, and I had 2 degrees in my hand and I didn't have a dime in student loans.
Right.
There wasn't very many people that left Illinois with 2 degrees in their hands and that didn't owe a lot of money, and I felt like I was on top of the world. Now we've got NIL, and now if you don't leave there with $250,000, you're a failure in your bank account. And oh, by the way, let's try to get a degree with that too.
Yeah, exactly. You've got 18-year-olds getting that much money. Like, what are the odds of them being real serious about their education? Probably isn't very realistic. But
yeah,
well,
yeah.
Well, I guess good luck with all that.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, it's fun to be in the middle of it, and you hope that what you're able to be a part of will have some lasting impact in a positive way.
Right. Absolutely. Well, this would be the part where I would go in here and see if have my son ask you a question, but I bet you he's asleep. I just walked back in the house real quick. Yeah, definitely. It's 9 o'clock. He better be asleep. Yep, he's out. Okay.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, it's good. But well, this is man, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. This was yeah.
Oh, I had a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun
absolutely.
with it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I will. I'll let you know. I'll keep you posted on when things are coming out, when I'll put it out and everything. But Great
if you do, I don't know if you posted anything on Twitter or anything, but if you do or something, just tag me, and I'm happy to punch it back out there and try to do whatever I can to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome, man. Well, thank you very, very much. This was great.
Okay. Yep. Absolutely. Anytime. You've got my number, and anytime I can help you out with anything, you ever want to come to a game or anything, let me know, and happy to take care of you.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Yep. Take care. Have a good evening.
Yep, you too. All right.
Bye.